They say Vermont is brave in the winter. It's a different kind of brave than the Rockies or the Sierras. Out west, the mountains are jagged teeth trying to bite the sky. Here, the Green Mountains are old. They're slumped shoulders, worn down by glaciers and time, covered in forests so dense, they feel like a wool blanket pulled over your face to smother you. My name is Simon, and I hunt ghosts. Well, not ghosts exactly. I hunt the missing. I run a channel called Cold Coordinates, where I visit places where people walked off the map and never came back. I've done the national parks, the deserts, the sprawling urban decay of Detroit, but nothing prepared me for Bennington. If you look at a map of southwestern Vermont, you'll see the town of Bennington. If you draw a line from there to Glastonbury Mountain, then over to Somerset and back, you get a triangle. Since 1945, at least 5 people have vanished in that small patch of woods. Not got lost and died of exposure, I mean vanished. No bodies, no footprints, just gone. The most famous one is Paula Weldon, the college student in the red coat. But the one that brought me here was James Tedford. In 1949, Tedford got on a bus in St. Albans. He was heading home to the soldiers' home in Bennington. 14 other people saw him on that bus. They saw him sleeping in his seat. His luggage was on the rack. The bus didn't make any unscheduled stops, but when it pulled into Bennington, James Tedford wasn't there. His coat was on the seat. His bus schedule was open on his lap, but the man himself had ceased to exist somewhere between the last stop and the terminal. I wanted to drive that route. I wanted to see the road where a man could evaporate inside a moving vehicle. I arrived in Bennington in mid-November. It's a transitional time here. The glorious autumn foliage has rotted into brown sludge, and the first snows are threatening to bury everything. The town itself feels trapped in amber. Antique shops, white steeples, and that pervasive New England silence that feels polite, but secretive. I rented a cabin just outside the Triangle Zone. My plan was simple. During the day, hike the Long Trail up to the ruins of Glastonbury, a ghost town that was once a logging hub and is now just cellar holes and bad memories. At night, drive Route 7, recording the GPS data and looking for anomalies. The first sign that something was wrong happened before I even left the cabin. I was reviewing my gear. I had 2 GoPros, a DSLR, a high-end audio recorder, and a satellite phone. I turned on the audio recorder to test the levels. Testing, 1-2, November 12th, Bennington investigation, I said into the mic. I played it back. What came out of the speaker wasn't my voice. It was a low, static-filled hum, like wind blowing over a deep cavern, and underneath the static, very faint, a rhythmic sound. Thump, 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 thump. It sounded like a heartbeat or footsteps on a hollow floor. I frowned and swapped the batteries. Interference, I muttered. Old wiring in the cabin. I drove to the trailhead of the Long Trail around 1 p.m. The parking lot was empty. A sign warned hikers, weather changes rapidly. Be prepared. Someone had scratched another message into the wood with a knife. They are hungry. I started the hike. The goal was Glastonbury Mountain. The trail was steep, covered in slick, wet leaves. For the first hour, it was just a hike. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth. But as I climbed higher, the atmosphere shifted. The locals talk about the Bennington silence. They say that inside the triangle, sound doesn't travel right. One minute you hear the wind and the distant highway, and the next, it's like someone hit the mute button on the world. It happened when I reached the first clearing. I stopped to take a drink of water. I realized I couldn't hear the stream I had just crossed 50 yards back. I couldn't hear the wind in the pines, even though I could see the branches swaying violently. I clapped my hands. The sound was flat, dead. It didn't echo. It fell out of the air like a stone. I felt a pressure in my ears, like I was deep underwater. I checked my GPS. It was spinning. Not just searching for a signal, but the arrow was rotating clockwise, steady and rhythmic, like the second hand of a clock. "Okay," I whispered. My voice sounded tinny inside my own head. Magnetic anomaly. That's expected. I pushed on. I wanted to see the ruins. Glastonbury is a ghost town. In the truest sense, there are no buildings left standing, just foundations. Pits in the earth where houses used to be, now filled with black water and dead leaves. It felt like walking through a graveyard where the graves had been opened. I was filming a particularly large cellar hole when I saw it. Across the clearing, standing at the edge of the tree line, was a splash of color. Bright, vibrant red. It was shocking against the gray and brown palette of the woods. A red coat. A hooded parka, specifically. My heart jumped. Paula Weldon, the girl who vanished in 1946, was wearing a red parka. "Hello?" I called out. The sound died instantly in the strange vacuum. The figure didn't move. It was facing away from me, looking into the dense thicket. It looked like a woman, small frame, dark hair spilling over the red collar. "Miss, are you okay?" I took a step forward. She turned around. I dropped my camera. Where her face should have been, there was nothing. Not a skull, not a blurred mess. It was smooth, pale skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a blank canvas of flesh. I blinked and the world tilted. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I fell to my knees. When I looked up, the red coat was gone. The tree line was empty. I scrambled for my camera, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I checked the footage. On the screen, I saw the clearing. I saw the trees. But there was no red coat. The spot where she had stood was empty in the video. Altitude sickness, I told myself, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Carbon monoxide pocket. Hallucination. I grabbed my gear and ran down the mountain. I didn't care about the footage anymore. I just wanted to be back in my car, back on the pavement, back in reality. But the mountain doesn't let you leave that easily. As I hurried down the trail, the sun began to set. It set too fast. I checked my watch. It was only 3:30 p.m. Sunset shouldn't be for another hour. But the shadows were stretching out, turning into long black fingers grasping at my ankles. And the path was different. I remembered crossing a wooden footbridge on the way up. It wasn't there. The trail just wound through a grove of massive boulders that looked like sleeping giants. I'm lost, I thought, panic rising in my throat. I'm going to be number 6. Then I heard a sound, a mechanical sound, the hiss of air brakes. In the middle of the woods, miles from the nearest road. I froze. The sound came from my left, through the dense trees. Hiss, thunk. The sound of a bus door opening. I crept toward the sound, pushing through the prickly spruce branches. I broke through the brush onto a paved road. I stared at it. It was Route 7. But it shouldn't be here. I was halfway up Glastonbury Mountain. Route 7 was miles to the west in the valley. Standing on the shoulder of this impossible road was a bus. Not a modern transit bus. It was an old, rounded 1940-style coach painted a dull silver and blue. The engine was idling with a low, throaty rumble. The destination sign above the windshield read, Bennington. The door was open. The interior lights were on, casting a sickly yellow glow onto the asphalt. There was no driver. I should have run. I should have turned back into the dark woods and taken my chances with the bears and the cold. But curiosity is a disease, and I was terminal. I walked toward the bus. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone there?" Silence. I stepped onto the stairs. The rubber treads were worn smooth. The smell hit me first. Stale tobacco smoke, wool, and something metallic, like ozone or copper. I looked down the aisle. The bus appeared empty. Rows of empty leather seats. But as I walked down the aisle, I noticed something on the third seat to the left. A newspaper. The Bennington Banner. I picked it up. The paper was crisp, not yellowed by age. The date in the corner, December 1, 1949. The headline read, "Tedford missing from bus." My blood ran cold. I wasn't holding an antique. I was holding today's paper in 1949. I dropped the paper and spun around to leave. The door at the front of the bus slammed shut with a hydraulic hiss. The engine roared. The bus lurched forward. I ran to the front, pounding on the glass door. "Hey, let me out! Open the door!" There was nobody in the driver's seat. The steering wheel turned by itself, hand over hand, guiding the heavy vehicle onto the dark road. I looked out the windshield. The headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the trees. But the trees were changing. As the bus picked up speed, the pines and maples blurred. They lost their color. They turned into gray, vertical streaks. Then the world outside the windows vanished. We weren't on a road anymore. We were driving through a thick, swirling gray mist. There was no asphalt, no sky, no ground, just the void. And then I realized I wasn't alone on the bus. I turned around slowly. In the back row, sitting in the shadows, were 13 people. They were sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead. They were all wearing clothes from different decades. A hiker in 90s neon gear, an old man in a 1940s fedora, a girl in a red parka. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. And as the bus accelerated into the nothingness, I saw the man in the fedora, James Tedford, start to fade. First his feet became transparent, then his legs. He didn't look in pain. He just looked resigned. I looked at my own hands. My fingertips were turning gray. I could see the bus floor through my palms.
Panic is a strange thing. It usually makes you scream, makes you fight. But when you look down and see your own body dissolving like smoke in a draft, panic turns into a cold, heavy stone in your gut. I was fading. I stumbled backward, grabbing the back of a seat for support. My hand passed halfway through the leather before finding purchase. It felt like dipping my hand into ice water. "What is this?" I yelled at the passengers. "What is happening?" The girl in the red parka, the faceless thing I had seen on the mountain, slowly turned her head. She didn't have a face, but I felt her gaze. A voice echoed in my head, not heard, but felt, vibrating in my teeth. "The triangle is not a place," the voice said. "It is a hunger, and it travels." "I'm not dead," I shouted, slapping my own face to feel the sting. It hurt, but it felt distant, like slapping a numb limb. "I'm Simon. I'm from 2023. I have a family. I exist." The bus hit a bump in the nothingness, jarring everyone. The man in the fedora, James Tedford, was almost gone now. Only his head and shoulders remained visible, floating eerily above the seat. He looked at me, his eyes filled with infinite sadness. "We are the toll," he whispered. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "What road?" I demanded. "Where are we going?" "Nowhere," Tedford said. "We are the spaces in between. When you walk into a room and forget why you're there, that's us. When you lose an hour of time on a drive, that's us. We are the friction that keeps the world spinning." He vanished. Just pop. His fedora settled onto the seat. His coat collapsed into a heap. I looked at the driver's seat. The speedometer was climbing. 60, 70, 80. The gray mist outside was getting brighter, shifting from a dull fog to a blinding violet luminescence, the Bennington light that sailors and hikers had reported for centuries. It wasn't a UFO. It was the friction of reality tearing apart. I had to stop the bus. I ran to the front. My legs felt heavy, sluggish, like I was wading through molasses. I looked down. My boots were almost invisible. I grabbed the steering wheel. It was freezing cold. I tried to wrench it to the right to steer us where? Into the void? Anything was better than fading away. The wheel wouldn't budge. It was locked in place by an unseen force. "Think, Simon, think," I screamed at myself. The audio recorder. It was still in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was solid, real. I pressed record. "My name is Simon. I am on a bus. Route 7. James Tedford is gone. I am disappearing. If you find this, don't come looking." Then an idea hit me. The legend said the wind on Glastonbury Mountain stops because the mountain absorbs sound. Sound is energy. Reality is vibration. If this place was a void, maybe I could fill it. Maybe I could anchor myself. I grabbed my satellite phone. No signal, obviously, but I had my downloaded playlists. I plugged the phone into the portable speaker I carried in my pack. I cranked the volume to max. I hit play on the heaviest, loudest track I had, some thrash metal I used for editing montages. The music exploded into the silent bus. Drums, screaming guitars, distortion. The effect was immediate and violent. The passengers covered their ears, those who had them. The girl in the red parka screeched, a sound like tearing metal. The gray mist outside the window swirled turbulently. The bus shook. The lights flickered. Sound waves, vibration. I was introducing chaos into a static system. "I am here," I screamed along with the music. "I am real. I am matter." I looked at my hands. They were flickering, solid, transparent, solid, transparent. I was fighting the fade. The bus driver's seat, the empty space, began to manifest a shape, a shadow, a dark humanoid form made of the same violet light as the void outside. It turned to look at me. It didn't have a face, just a swirling vortex where a head should be. It reached for the speaker. I lunged for the door lever. It was an old manual crank. I grabbed it with both hands. My hands were solid now. The music was grounding me.
The shadow driver swiped at me. Its touch burned like liquid nitrogen. It tore through my jacket, raking my arm. I screamed but didn't let go. "Open, damn you!" I kicked the dashboard and threw my weight against the lever. With a screech of rusty metal, the door mechanism gave way. The doors folded open. The rush of air was deafening. It wasn't air. It was a vacuum trying to suck the marrow out of my bones. Below the bus, through the swirling mist, I saw something. Asphalt. Wet, black asphalt. And yellow lines. And headlights. We were flying above Route 7. We were superimposed over the real world. I had to jump. I looked back at the passengers. The girl in the red coat was standing now. She raised a hand. It wasn't a threat. It was a wave goodbye. "Go," she whispered. I grabbed my pack, clutched the speaker to my chest, and threw myself out of the moving bus into the void. I fell. I fell for what felt like hours, and also for a second. I saw colors that don't exist. I heard conversations from the past and future overlapping. My mother calling me for dinner. My own funeral. a news report about my disappearance. Then, slam. Pain, absolute crushing pain. I hit something hard and wet. I rolled, tumbling over gravel and dead leaves, smashing my shoulder against a tree root. I lay there, gasping, staring up at the sky. It was night. It was raining. Cold, freezing rain. I could hear the wind. I could hear a car driving by in the distance. I laughed. It was a broken wheezing sound, but I laughed. I touched my face. Solid. I touched my legs. Solid. I sat up. I was in a ditch on the side of Route 7, just south of Bennington. My clothes were shredded. My arm was bleeding where the shadow touched me. The scratches looked like burns, black and cauterized. I checked my pocket. The speaker was smashed to pieces from the impact. The phone was cracked but working. I looked at the date, November 19th. I had gone up the mountain on November 12th. I had been gone for a week. To me, it had been an hour. I staggered to the road and flagged down a passing truck. The driver looked at me like I was a zombie, bloody, muddy, laughing hysterically. "Buddy, you okay?" he asked, rolling down the window. "You look like you went through a wood chipper." "I missed my stop," I said. "I just missed my stop." I don't hunt the missing anymore. I deleted the channel. I burned the footage from the camera I recovered. Well, most of it. There was one file I kept. It was recorded by the GoPro strapped to my chest when I jumped. Because of the frame rate and the chaotic motion, it's mostly a blur, but there is one single frame right before I hit the ground. The camera is pointing up at the sky. You can see the night sky, the rain, the trees. But overlaid on top of the sky, faint and ghostly, is the undercarriage of an old 1940s bus. And looking out of the back window, pressing a pale hand against the glass, is James Tedford. He's not looking at me. He's looking at the road ahead. Because the bus never stops. It just keeps circling the triangle, collecting its toll. And sometimes, when I'm sitting in a quiet room and the silence gets too heavy, I can hear the engine idling, waiting for the next passenger. I live in Arizona now, in the desert, where you can see for miles, where there are no trees to block the view. But even here, I never take the bus, and I never, ever sit by the window.